What's up, gang? Thanks for joining the Undiplomatic Podcast, the show with undiplomatic takes about the foreign policy scene. I'm Van Jackson here with my co-hosts Matt Duss and Julia Gladhill. How y'all doing? Welcome back.
Oh my God.
Hanging in.
What?
That good, eh? So I don't even know where to start. Maybe we should start with levity, which is to say Tucker Carlson ruining Ted Cruz's life, or Ted Cruz ruining himself on Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, with Tucker Carlson's assistance, yeah.
Oh my God. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of, almost everything we have to talk about is going to have to do with like either American fascism or war with Iran. And the Tucker Carlson thing is a bit of an intersection of these things, I suppose. But for context, Tucker Carlson is this very toxic far right media, mogul who had been on Fox for decades even, and then he got fired like 2 years ago. He put out his own shingle. Now he's kind of like he's doing the same thing he did before, but independent, and he's part of like a weird section of MAGA that they're anti-war when it comes to the Middle East. They're pro-war against other Americans, the Chinese, Latin America, fucking like, they're not to call them the anti-war MAGA would be like not correct or category error, I think, which we should keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because he's very good at the lost art of debate, which like in the 90s, I think people still had the juice, and like now people are fucking fish brained and like can't think critically and don't prepare for their podcast. And Tucker Carlson's interviewing Ted Cruz in a way that harkens back almost to a different era. And now it hits hard as fuck because people don't do this. And certainly Democrats don't do this. So that's the preamble. Let's marinate in what we're about to see real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people living around?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah,
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that
because if
relevant?
you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
I'm saying he doesn't know anything about the country.
They are Persians and
What percent?
predominantly Shia. Okay, this is cute.
It's not
okay.
even... You don't know anything about Iran. So
okay,
actually,
I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a
just
senator
watch
who's
the
calling
whole-
for the
the whole
overthrow of the
interview.
government.
You're the one
You
who
don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump. You're the
I'm
one
not saying that.
who can't figure out
I'm
if it was a
saying
good
you
idea
don't
to kill
believe-
General Soleimani, and you said it was
You don't
bad.
believe they're trying to murder Trump.
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. And if
Okay,
you really
we're
believe that...
carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive
No,
capacity.
we're not
at all.
bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting
This is high
Israel.
stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at war
we're-
with Iran right now, people are listening.
Okay.
Oh, shit.
I guess the biggest thing that struck me about this interview, and there were obviously a lot of funny moments, and it was very weird to be cheering on Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
But the thing that Ted Cruz comes back to again and again is first, he supports Israel, but won't define the government of Israel or the nation of Israel, whatever his understanding of that is, because of Christianity. And obviously he talks about the Bible and whatever. He comes back to that. That's why he's personally motivated to defend Israel and its interests in his own words, right? And at one point he says, not all of my constituents are Christians, so that's not my motivation as a legislator. His second reason for defending Israel, again, however he defines it, is, well, they are doing us a favor because they are going after Iran, which is trying to kill the president. And over he says, this country, they're after us, death to America, death to Israel. And this is a favor for Israel to be, fighting a country that is trying to kill our president. And to me, I sort of thought throughout the whole interview, well, isn't that kind of par for the course for a president? I mean, you can just be like an even moderately well-known legislator and have death threats every single day. That's not like
who doesn't?
even close.
I get fucking death threats. Are you kidding me?
Like, if you're on the internet in any capacity, you get threats. So the fact that his only real reason beyond his biblical interests or loyalties is that Iran is trying to kill the president, and then he says there's lots of other benefits. There's all these benefits. He keeps saying that, and says what JD Vance has said, what others have said, which is that the president has been really consistent in that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. But he doesn't actually really explain what any of these so-called benefits are for the United States in supporting Israel and waging this war and starting this war with Iran. I guess I'm less familiar with sort of like what these interviews used to look like on cable news in the 90s, because I've never watched cable news, to be frank. But it seems to me like, and I think Matt said this on Twitter, he did no preparation for this. His staff didn't feel the need to prepare him for this. He's going to go into like a 2-hour interview and not know basic facts or have really any capacity to answer direct questions beyond reverting back to anecdotes that are only tangentially relevant in a very just like textbook politician way that is supposed to draw people in, but I think in reality really makes him look so superficial. But yeah, I guess it was so difficult to watch Ted Cruz sit through this and cheer Tucker on, in part because he can't even explain what the so-called benefits are to the United States. And like the death threat thing, who cares? He's president. Of course people are going to be trying to kill him. Yeah.
No, Ted Cruz, he's supposed to be a smart guy. Like that's even though he's slimy and evil or whatever, it's his virtue is supposed to be that he's smart. That's his supposed asset. It wasn't on display at all in this interview. Like, no. And it is a matter of prep. And the failure of prep here, that Tucker Carlson represents the face of a major fissure within MAGA.
But like, it's worth going back to Tucker Carlson's kind of origin story. I don't know if you guys covered that at all. So he was like a legit journalist in the late 90s. He was with the Weekly Standard. He was very much, of the neoconservatives, supporter
like of the Bill Kristol type, yeah.
Yeah. Weekly Standard, Bill Kristol's magazine. And then he was one of the co-hosts of Crossfire. On
that was CNN, the show I was thinking of, the debate show, Crossfire.
Right. Yeah. And then like Jon Stewart ended the kind of first part of his career with this absolutely brutal takedown of both Carlson and Begala, where he was like, you guys are just like, you're hacks. Like, you don't take these issues seriously. You treat this all as a sport, which there was some truth to that. No, I mean, I think there's issues with Stewart's whole approach to politics as well. But then he came back initially as a kind of serious journalist, the Daily Caller. But then he just decided to lean all into the right wing kind of troll piece of it. But yeah, watching him with Cruz, what I thought of, I mean, first of all, he's got that like Tucker Carlson look where he just does this like, he'll like ask a question and they'll be like, I don't understand. And like
listeners are really missing out on this part.
And a lot of times that's enough, because what was, Ted Cruz, if you don't know, and I'd be surprised if you don't, because he makes sure this is always covers that he was a big debate team guy, right? He was part of the debate team at Princeton. And you could see him trying to use his usual debate team tricks, which work when you're doing like a 3-minute segment on Fox News or somewhere else. But when you're sitting there for a long form interview and your interviewer is just not having it, as Tucker Carlson was absolutely not having it, it just doesn't work. And you could see him just kind of fall apart when Tucker was like just parrying and not accept, like Cruz is constantly trying to turn the question back on Tucker. He's constantly trying to challenge the premise of the question. And Tucker's just like, no, I want to get an answer to my question. Why can't you answer this question? Then he gives the look, and that's part, you can just see Cruz become completely discombobulated. I mean, that's part of so that's not necessarily substantive, but it is substantive when you consider that Cruz is there to argue for getting into a huge war, right? He's arguing for policies that are going to get lots of people killed, have already gotten lots of people killed, and we'll get many, many more people killed. So being on the side of Tucker Carlson is not a familiar place, nor should it be a familiar place for any progressive. But given the choice of these two people, I'm going to go with the guy who wants to get fewer people killed. And right now, Tucker Carlson seems to want to get fewer people killed. And so I think,
I don't even want to take sides of them. I'm just happy that, somebody is putting the fucking going to work on what is obviously like a pretty flaccid set of arguments,
right,
to get everybody killed and to distract from
the
myriad problems in America.
Right. And by virtue of being like definitely a part of the movement, he is able to challenge some of these premises and these talking points in a way that other journalists either can't or won't. And I think the people who should feel the worst about this interview are literally every other journalist who've ever interviewed Ted Cruz, because Tucker Carlson just showed like how worthless you are at your job. All he had to do was kind of push Cruz off of his comfortable talking points, and the guy just falls apart.
Well, let's go with one more of these delicious clips.
Does Mossad share all of its intelligence with us?
Oh, probably not, but they share a lot. We don't share all of our intelligence with them, but we share a lot. It's a close alliance.
Do they spy domestically in the United States?
Oh, they probably do, and we do as well. And friends and allies spy on each other. And I assume all of our allies spy on us.
And that's okay with you?
You know what? One of the things about being a conservative is that you're not naive and utopian. You don't think humans are all... Part of the reason socialism doesn't work is the mantra from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs doesn't work. As a conservative, I assume people act in their rational self-interest.
So it's conservative to pay people to spy on you?
It's conservative to recognize that human beings act in their own self-interest, and every one of our friends spies on us. And I'm not...
Do you like it? That's my question. I'm not asking whether they have a motive to do it. Of course they do. I understand that. And by the way, I'm not mad at them. You're an American lawmaker, so I just want to know, hold on, I want to know your attitude. Yeah. You said that your guiding principle, in fact, the only principle, the only criterion.
I said guiding, the overwhelming, I wouldn't say only.
Is it in America's interest? Is it in America's interest for Israel to spy on us, including on the president?
It is in America's interest to be closely allied with Israel because we get huge benefits for it. And you want to see the clearest...
But I just want to stop on the spying for a second. That it takes place, as you know, and including on the president of the United States and several precedents. And I just want to know if that's okay and why is it okay? Wouldn't an American lawmaker say to a client state, you're not allowed to spy on us? I'm sorry. I know why you want to. I'm not mad at you, but you're not allowed to.
Sure.
And I don't care for it. I don't want to be spied on by you. Is that... It's kind of weird not to say that, but you don't seem able to say that.
So snarky.
Yeah, no.
Can we is it conservative to pay them to spy on you?
Do you like it?
Do you like it? Yes, I love it. No, I mean, but like Cruz's defense, like as a conservative, I'm not naive and utopian. In the same interview, he is undertaking to support the liberation of Iran by bombing the shit out of them. I mean, I love this like retreat into I understand the world as it is. Like, buddy, come on.
Yeah, there's this weird two-step of like claiming the mantle of realism that often happens while expressing the most like grimly utopian of ideas.
Right.
It's like the
neoconservative violence though.
You want to remake the world through like mass killings.
Yeah.
And you sell it as realism.
So unrealistic about actually feeding people and giving them health care. The way to do it is by dropping bombs.
Yeah, fuck you.
He calls himself a non-interventionist hawk in this interview, which I haven't heard that before. And he actually offered that up. It means nothing. It's whatever he wants to do. And then the other interesting part about this interview, which was so long, was the line of questioning on foreign influence and Tucker kind of probing him on the role of AIPAC and the idea of lawmakers, prioritizing the interests of a foreign government, and kind of probing sort of how those interests are conveyed to lawmakers. And Ted Cruz says something about, AIPAC is, it's not an entity that, you know, represents the Israeli government. It's a bunch of individuals and they're Americans and da-da. It's like, dude, like, people don't like Citizens United. The argument that a super PAC like that is representing individual interests is, you know, crazy. And I think most people believe that. And, you know, Tucker kind of pushes him and says, okay, well, do you think that AIPAC is in conversation with the Israeli government? And Ted says, well, maybe, sure. But it was just funny. And I think it shines a big light on the war powers conversation right now, because the people who are supporting resolutions that are, you know, trying to reassert Congress's constitutional powers on matters of war are largely people who are not supported by AIPAC.
Yeah, just on that point, that line of question was really interesting because, again, I think Tucker, you know, zeroed in to an important point where, you know, the claim that Cruz makes, and this is AIPAC's claim as well, is that, oh, we don't lobby for the Israeli government. We lobby for a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. Tucker's question, which was the right one, he's like, okay, like, has AIPAC ever lobbied for something that's against what the Israeli government wants? And Cruz is like, oh, yeah, sure. And Tucker's like, when? And the answer is never. I mean, and never. That is the real question. It's like, it's fine to say, like, it's fine for people to support a relationship between the U.S. and any country. But if your lobbying, you know, basically cashes out as the U.S. must always support the preferences of this one other government at all times, you are lobbying for a foreign government.
Well, there was another moment in the interview, for the sake of time, I won't play it, but it was also hilarious. And Ted Cruz, like, low-key accused Tucker Carlson of being an anti-Semite, which like might in fact be true. I mean, you know, not within the context of what was being said.
No, I'll say it is true. Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Thank you. But the reasoning that Ted Cruz was giving was because he was Tucker was questioning Ted Cruz about his need for war with Iran. I mean, like, Ted Cruz's obsession with Iran was something that Tucker Carlson was questioning, and Ted Cruz was trying to, like you said, flip it around and be like, oh, you might be anti-Semitic because you're obsessed with not going to war with Iran, or you're obsessed with, like, criticizing Israel or something, as if it's beyond criticism.
Carlson makes the point, it's like, you're the one who say that, like, supporting Israel is one of the, like, he ran in 2010 saying, I want to be Israel's biggest defender in Congress. And he repeats that in the interview. And Tucker rightly points out, you are the one who is obsessed with Israel.
Yeah. Seems problematic to me. Oh, and then Ted Cruz goes, he accused it. He's like, you're saying, like, Jews control American foreign policy, like the Jews, and, like, that's anti-Semitic. And it's like, well, there's a section of Jews who do in fact control American foreign policy, and they run the state of Israel, right? Is that Jews? No. Is that all the Jews? No. Is that most of the Jews? No. But there's a section of Jews that run the government who have undue influence and have corrupted our foreign policy, and they basically define our agenda in the Middle East. Is it lights out, Matt?
Yeah, we just lost our power. We're having a storm over here, so
it's really
how long this lasts. I wouldn't even say they control U.S. foreign policy. I mean, this is obviously a bigger debate. What Cruz's response, you know, was, you could see, again, using his debate team tricks, like, why do you oppose Jews participating in politics? I mean, it's so cheap and cheesy. You know, Tucker rightly is like, no, I don't oppose anyone's involvement in politics. It was just, you know, this particular lobby that lobbies on behalf of this particular foreign government. But I'll just, like, the final point I'll make here. Yes, I think, you know, the relationship is close. Yes, I think the Israeli government has too much influence over U.S. policy. But I also think the United States, there is definitely a faction of the U.S. foreign policy establishment that definitely sees Israel as kind of our sheriff in the region. And we see that being played out with enormous violence right now. And so that's one of the reasons why I tend to be very cautious about, you know, which way the influence is going, because I don't want to absolve the United States. We are the ones. Israel is in many ways just an expression of our will to power, or at least the U.S. foreign policy establishment's will to power.
That's
if that makes
interesting.
Sense.
So there's, like, the causal arrow kind of goes in both directions, or like it's
for sure,
or like we're mutually constant. Well, so this is the Zionist project in the sort of psycho-millenarian sense that constitutes both sides of this thing. You know, like, they're united in this larger, disgusting I mean, ultimately, white supremacist thing. All right, so let's move on because you guys might lose power. I didn't realize there was a storm going on. So
yeah, it's it's the rainy season, like for the past couple of days here in the DC
oh wow,
area.
Before the heat dome hits.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's freezing here. JD Vance, I believe he's still vice president. He had a like prolonged tweet. He writes these like op-ed length tweets now because I think he doesn't have any real things to do. And they're mostly just like obfuscating and doing like, mouth jazz type stuff on behalf of like muddying the waters of accountability for whatever Trump decides to do. He's trying to please Papa. And so he had this long tweet where he at one time, he's like, look, people are right to be skeptical about another war in the Middle East, another foreign intervention. He's like, the GWAT era has been a disaster, blah, blah, blah. But then he was also like, and POTUS has been amazingly consistent over 10 years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And so he uses these premises basically to justify whatever happens next, right? Like if Trump decides to not continue American involvement in this like burgeoning war, JD Vance is like on safe ground. If he decides to escalate American involvement, which is increasingly appearing to be the case, then JD Vance is helping like justify that. But ultimately, his punchline was like, this decision, whatever we decide, sits with POTUS. Like Trump is the decider about this.
It doesn't. I mean, the Constitution is pretty clear that Congress has the authority to declare war or not declare war. Now, obviously, Congress has abdicated that power repeatedly for 20 to 30 years, probably more. That's something the War Powers Act of 1973 was meant to address. And yet, Congress likes not having to weigh in on these issues. And presidents love being able to have the power to make these decisions on their own. And that's so, just as a constitutional legal matter, JD Vance is incorrect that the decision lies with the president alone. So unfortunately, that's where we are. I mean, as for JD Vance, listen, he's clearly, trying to hug Trump's leg. He wants to be the inheritor of MAGA. He understands that, as Trump said earlier this week, MAGA is what I say it is.
Yeah, the imperial presidency continues to linger as a problem for all of us. I don't know if one of you guys can kind of like summarize what's been happening the past 6 days with Iran. Israel has launched a like massive campaign of strikes and bombings, has not totally targeted Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Like some key elements of Iran's nuclear infrastructure still exist, like the crucial elements for producing a bomb, in fact. But it's a fucking war. Like Iran and Israel are at war. Iran has retaliated, not, I would say, like less proportional than to what Israel has done, but partially that's because they were so caught off guard.
Well, right before we recorded, like an hour before, Trump said through Caroline Leavitt that he's going to make a decision in the next 2 weeks. I kind of wonder if he's letting this play out a little bit, especially with this like Tucker Carlson interview, which apparently Tucker called the president, maybe apologized after, ripping.
Dude, what if that interview changes history?
That's what I'm saying. I actually think that Trump obviously has no principles, was never an anti-war president, but I do think he's letting things play out right now. And of course, the critical question is whether the United States would provide bunker busters to Israel to, target Iran's nuclear facilities, which are some of which are like within a mountain. But I mean, as you say, Van, it's definitely not a fair fight. I mean, Iran is weak. Iran has like missiles, and that's kind of it. They don't have the kind of air defense systems that Israel does. And so, the United States has sent refuelers and things like that to Israel. But the main question, at least from what I've seen, is the bunker buster question. And I do think it's encouraging that Trump is stalling.
I agree. I mean, as of a couple of days ago, folks that I talked to who are close to Trump world seem to think this was fairly baked, that Trump was going to follow in B-2s, 30,000-pound bombs dropping on Fordo. And as of last night, I still kind of thought that was the case. But this announcement of waiting 2 weeks, I don't know if he's meant to just put people at ease and then surprise everyone he loves. I don't know what I'm going to do. No one knows what I'm going to do. I mean, it's disgusting for a president. You know, he's like, am I going to have a pool in my new casino? I don't know. Nobody knows.
He's very
I mean,
finger
these are
in the wind
issues
about
of
all
enormous.
of this. Yeah.
Just backing up how we got here. I mean, I was, last Thursday evening at, a dinner discussion, as happened so many times here in Washington. And, in the middle of that, everyone is looking at their phones like, oh my God, this is happening. 2 days before there were supposed to be, or 3 days before there was supposed to be another round of talks on the nuclear program between the US and Iran. I think there's been, there's a New York Times piece a couple of days ago that gave a TikTok of how Trump kind of changed his mind, was kind of finally convinced by Netanyahu and others like Tom Cotton and Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham and all the worst people to kind of give Bibi, if not a green light, then at least a yellowish light, which Bibi could interpret as a green light, and launch this attack. You look at Marco Rubio's statement last Thursday evening, and it's unequivocal. This is Israel. We are not involved in this. But then by the next morning, Trump had spent the evening watching Fox News and seeing all the amazing explosions and seeing all the anchors talking about how impressive all this was. And let's be fair. I mean, this was an impressive operation. Israel can do impressive shit. The question is what it all adds up to. But Trump was convinced by the next morning to put out this statement that clearly, tried to take some credit. But the story that the Israelis kind of put out there, that this was all secretly planned by Trump and Netanyahu, was just clearly bullshit. But that aside, Trump clearly is behind it now. So the question on everyone's mind is like, do we come in, do we actually send U.S. bombers to hit Fordo? And I think the attention on Fordo is, part of that is, I think, just designed to draw the U.S. in, because Fordo is what we know about. A lot of experts believe that there are facilities that we don't know. That Fordo is this facility that, only U.S. bombs, this huge bomb, can penetrate, is kind of seen as a hook for getting the U.S. involved. But that said, even if the U.S. did that, that would not solve this problem. I mean, there are all these other scenarios. Is like, at some point, and I think it's really worth continuing to stress this, at some point you are talking about U.S. boots on the ground to assess the amount of damage. Who's going in there to determine the state of Iran's nuclear program such that we can claim to have done enough to set the program back, to justify, just these blatant violations of international law, blatant war of aggression? Those are questions I don't see people discussing enough, unsurprisingly.
Yeah. I mean, I read 2 reported pieces that Trump greenlit this campaign, full stop, and that it wasn't clear that that was the case when it was all first happening. But now it increasingly appears that, yeah, that was the case. And the question is like, there is a question of like how much support involvement, or like intelligence support, especially, or like DoD support that might have been going on already. But there's also, like, I've seen reports about like a large number of B2s, US B2s deployed to Diego Garcia, along with refuelers. So the B2 is what would be dropping these necessary bombs, or whatever, quote unquote, necessary bombs, right? The B2 range also would not be able to fly would just barely not be able to fly from Diego Garcia to Iran and back. It would need refueling. And these B2s were deployed with refueling tankers. This is some basic Sherlock Holmes shit. Like, by the powers of deduction, it is very obvious that we have a massive fleet of bombers that are in process to go bomb Iran. I mean, unless they're literally like up in the air on their way, it's not too late, right? And that's how Trump has basically positioned himself. It's like he could hold that back. This is kind of like what happened with North Korea in 2017, repeatedly. Like, we were constantly in this position where Trump had situated himself as like the adjudicator in chief between apocalypse or not apocalypse, right? And we kept playing that game so much that it became like Russian roulette. Like, we actually did lose control of the outcome at a certain point, and the whole thing got saved basically because of others, including fucking Kim Jong-un got what he wanted, and that sort of helped diffuse the crisis. But if it wasn't for that, we were just going to keep playing Russian roulette, fucking bang, bang, even if Trump decides to like not send in US bombers at this point, because he was persuaded by Tucker Carlson's shit or something like that, that doesn't mean that we don't end up involved still. And it doesn't mean that the war doesn't escalate, if he greenlit this, then Iranian blood is still already on his hands. I mean, like we're involved. We shouldn't be satisfied with like no boots on the ground. We should only be satisfied with like not fucking bombing other countries.
Yeah, absolutely right. And this is a point I've been trying to make, and I hope others keep making. But I don't want people to get locked up in the kind of process argument. My goal is not to have a debate about a war with Iran. My goal is to stop a fucking war with Iran.
Consulted Congress.
Right? Yeah. And like Congress would oftentimes vote for it. So
yeah.
Sometimes having the vote might not even be helpful to ending wars, much less preventing new ones.
That may be the case, but I think even without the vote, he seems likely to do it. So even if we just stall it, we have the vote, we get people on record, and then we primary the shit out of any Democrat who supports this.
Yeah, it's not looking good. Actually, to your point, Matt, you were in the chat, you raised a piece that you had in Foreign Policy about the Democrats. This is an ongoing theme of this fucking show, but like the Democrats really are the war party. They're like the party of the national security state. They've willfully made this choice repeatedly. They've decided to learn no lessons from 2024. They've decided that foreign policy had no role in the fucking outcome of the election. They're doubling down. They decided that CIA Alyssa Slotkin would be the best face of the party to answer the State of the fucking Union, right? And now once again, they're supporting this bullshit. Not all.
Well,
I mean, like our people, AOC, Bernie, but like,
but even more, I would say, yes, there's definitely a part of the establishment, this have decided for some reason that Alyssa Slotkin, I don't agree with that. Nothing personal against
because they don't like winning.
But I also, as the point I make,
you have relationships to preserve. I don't.
This was not always the case. I mean, listen, as I know, Barack Obama elected opposing the Iraq War. He was reelected in 2012, mocking Mitt Romney's hawkishness, right? But then you had 2016 with Hillary Clinton, who, again, very much a creature of the national security state, and got punished for it by Trump, who ran against the Iraq War, again, running as an anti-war candidate. 2020, Biden is the one who ran on ending forever wars, getting out of Afghanistan. He did some of that, but in general, Biden just couldn't make the pivot because he's Joe Biden. And he is just absolutely a political creature who grew up in the Cold War and the immediate post-Cold War. And I think Trump took advantage of that when Kamala couldn't, didn't even invest in foreign policy enough to distance herself and just kind of, thought she could talk about the lethal military and that would check the box, and then be out there campaigning with Liz Cheney and Bill Kristol, who, by the way, is, of course, back on board with Trump because Trump wants to make war on Iran.
That part's banana. Can we simmer in that for 1 second? He called Trump a fascist. He means it. He said he owes an apology to the abolish ICE people. Bill Kristol did. And like, this is a guy who supported axis of evil. There's never been a war he didn't like. And now he's suddenly thinking that Trump is a genuine fascist and he's concerned and he's right about all of that. But then 2 days ago, he wrote this bullshit about like, he thinks this fascist president should take America into war with Iran. Finish the job.
You go to war with the president you have, which that reference, if people know it, go fuck yourself, Bill Kristol. I mean, listen, like I was like saying, I was like, if you're telling me that this guy is a dangerous, wannabe authoritarian dictator, but also we should let him lead us into war, you don't really believe the first part, okay? I'm sorry, and I don't like to say I told you so, but I have always said that welcoming these people into the coalition brings us nothing. Okay. These people, listen, if Bill Kristol wants to vote for Democrats, fine. That's good. But treating them as heroes and lifting them up as, part of the anti-Trump resistance was always going to cash out this way. Bill Kristol was always going to cash out the capital he'd earned by supporting war.
No learning. It's like Seinfeld's
Yes.
foreign policy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Man, well, shit. I mean, so yes, Democrats, I think the Democrats' only path, assuming we get to have elections, is that they embrace peace or anti-war, anti-militarism. There's no, I don't see much sign of it. You know, like
I want to acknowledge there are signs of it. I mean, Jack Reed, in my piece, I was really surprised at Jack Reed's statement. Like,
no, dude, you're talking about individual politicians. I mean, the party, the DNC.
Yeah. No.
The party's fucked. The leadership is fucked.
I think that's right, but I don't.
That's why David Hogg got thrown out on his ass.
Right. Listen, I'm not here to defend the party establishment. Lord knows. But as I see it, I think there's a bit more ferment and a bit more debate going on around these issues than might be apparent. Yes, Jeffries and Schumer, they are the two leaders. They are awful on this issue. You got Murphy, you got Roe, obviously the squad. But no, I mean, you had like even Schumer, Reed, Warner, and all these hawks like put out a resolution or a letter just the other day on, Trump needs to come before Congress. And as I said, I'm not crazy about making this a process argument. But I'll take that. I want people to use whatever the path they need to get to the right place, which is opposing this war. We need a Democrat in 2028 who's against this, who makes peacemaking a central part of their plank, not just because it's right, because it can win. And that's the lesson of the last 30 years. As I note, in every election since the end of the Cold War, with the one exception of 2004, the less interventionist candidate has won.
Not only is that true, but maybe it's my bias, but like my timelines on social media and shit are full of anti-war sentiment from all corners. Like the left liberals, centrists, center-right people sometimes. Like it's like seems like the vibe is anti-war right now. Am I crazy?
No, I'm seeing the same thing on all of my socials. And, this was another point that Tucker actually made pretty well in the interview, just to go back to that, because he made quite a few of them. But, he asked Ted Cruz, why should we care about Iran when there are unhoused people, he didn't say that, sleeping outside of Union Station, which I walked by when I came to your office to record this interview. And, there's no good answer to that.
I guess one other big issue, now it's a few days ago, but the No Kings protests, right? So these were, massive protests. I don't know if you guys were able to get out for them.
Yeah, this was a really interesting weekend last weekend. The reporting has suggested that it was about 5 million people nationwide that showed up for No Kings protests, which it's hard to verify that at this time, but it's widely reported that this exceeded the numbers that we saw for the Women's March, particularly in places like Philadelphia and Chicago, New York, tens of thousands of people, almost 100,000 in Philly. And then there were, protesters in places like Mobile, Alabama, and Louisville, Kentucky. There, so 2,000 plus protests nationwide, all 50 states, huge, one of the biggest in US history, if not the biggest. And I have really mixed feelings. There was a lot going on last weekend. There was the military parade in DC. There was also No Kings. There was, the shooting that happened in Minnesota. This war had just kicked off Thursday night into Friday between Israel and Iran. And so, the people that you saw out there obviously had pretty big range of messages, a lot of homemade signs. But, personally, I saw a lot of people in my life from all walks of life participating. And I think it's a good thing. And I actually think it's a good sign that there is something for a 2028 candidate to work with there, because there's something to be said about the fact that people are taking time on their Saturdays to go protest. But it is obviously a problem that this is only ever anti-Trumpism. When you see the Women's March, when you see the No Kings March, it's still all about him. And so the challenge, I guess, is politically is how do you harness that in a way that's actually advancing something good and positive?
Right. What's the ask?
Yeah.
Right.
With the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, it's the biggest social movement in recorded history.
Yeah.
And and it was global too, right? And to be having been part of it, even going to protests here, it was intense and transformative for the individuals involved, right? For people who actually went. And there's research that shows, like actual peer-reviewed research that shows that the uptick in labor militancy in the US in the past like 4 years directly traces back to participation in the Black Lives Matter protests. And Biden won partly because of that moment that Black Lives Matter created. There were other things going on. The growth of the Justice Democrats and the Congressional Progressive
probably
Caucus.
of his career during those protests.
Yes. So like Black Lives Matter was like pushing all of that, like all of these like good things that happened were actually attributable partly to this mass movement. But at the same time, that movement has disappeared. It got co-opted very quickly by elites into symbolic nonsense. You know, it never delivered, and it was politically radicalizing for some individuals, especially like when you participate in a protest. That's part of what happens is like political education, affect, solidarity, resolve, commitment, like everything clarity about like whose side you're on starts to get into the fucking noggin. And there's no substitute for that of like how protests work. But it's like we have to kind of like right size what we expect from a protest, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely really energizing to participate. And I thought it was striking just to see intergenerationally that people really showed up. There were people in Minnesota who said, yeah, these lawmakers got shot. We're still showing up because we think this is really important. The country was coming off a week of the LA protests and the breakdown of our just general civil military
like they're under
relations.
military occupation now still, by the way, but okay.
Yes. And people still showed out. And I think that is really significant in terms of people overcoming fear. I'm not going to say putting their bodies on the line, but like to have like old people show up for a protest like that. I mean, I'm seeing people in my life protest for the first time and they're in their 60s.
It's definitely a good thing. It's just there is this question about like how do you convert it? Like when I hear like a lot of analysis of BLM, like what went wrong, there was like this failure to convert the mass energy into something, and like some of that comes down to still the lack of resources, the lack of institutional capacity,
the ability of police cartels to resist reform.
Yes. Yeah. So the balance of power in society is never on the side of the protesters. So.
The control of police cartels, unions, you know, to resist any real reform is enormous. So this is a particularly thorny issue. Also why it's a particularly bad one.
You see all these signs against cuts to Social Security or Medicaid, social programs, but I think people still don't connect the idea that like the warfare state is one and the same with the welfare state. It's all about, like the reason we have welfare programs is not to abolish poverty. It's to make it less difficult to deal with, essentially. And I think it's really difficult for people to tie those, make that connection and see that there are like, sort of the way that we do domestic repression is obviously a reflection of our foreign policy and vice versa. And it's like this vicious cycle. And so it's like protect my welfare, but it isn't moving past like what is something better than is this welfare state that is not actually designed to abolish homelessness, for example, that wouldn't exist without also our sort of war economy. Like it's all tied up in one another. And I think that is a challenge in messaging for, a future presidential candidate.
If somebody gets it right, they're the one. All right. Well, this was fun. Hope you guys feel good. So, all right. Like and subscribe, guys. Thanks. All right.
Thanks,
y'all. Take care.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.